This morning, if you'll take your Bible and turn with me to an old passage in Joshua. Joshua chapter 1, and verses number 6 through 9, as we look this morning at what makes a nation great in the sight of God. Now, I think a few of you have heard recently that there is candidates that say that they're going to make America great again. And then there's another candidate that says, well, America is already great, and so it can't be great again because it's great now. And then there are other candidates that ignore the idea of greatness altogether. I don't want to get involved in political wrangling this morning, but I do want to focus our attention on what it would be like to have a nation that is great in the sight of God. The question is, what makes a country or a people great? To many, it's not a very hard question, perhaps even a rhetorical question. Anyone that took American History 101 can quickly think to our founders of the United States of America and the Declaration of Independence that they wrote in 1776. The text of the second section of the Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But America is not great because of a group of men who got together 240 years ago and penned some words on a sheet of paper." In America, the immigrant immediately recognizes that things are different. A newcomer who sees America for the first time typically experiences emotion that is alternating between wonder and delight, between shock and awe. Here is a country where everything works. The roads are clean and paper smooth. The highway signs are clear and they're everywhere. And they're accurate. The public toilets function properly. When you pick up the telephone, you get a dial tone. You can even buy things from the store and then take them back after you've looked at them. For a third world visitor, America's supermarkets are a thing to behold. Endless aisles of everything imaginable. 50 different types of cereal. Multiple flavors of ice cream. The place is filled with countless unappreciated inventions. Quilted toilet paper. A product that just makes your clothes soft. Cordless telephones. Disposable diapers. Roll-on luggage. Deodorant. But America isn't great because of its excess of stuff. Few people in America have to wonder where their next meal is coming from. I know there's a few, but it's a rarity. Emergency medical care is available to everyone, even those without proper insurance. Every child in America has access to a free and public education. And many of those children have an opportunity to go to college. Ordinary Americans enjoy not only security and dignity, but also comforts that other society reserve strictly for their elite. We live in a country where construction workers regularly pay $4 for a non-latte, and where maids drive very nice cars, and plumbers and postal workers can take their families on vacation to Europe or the Caribbean. But America isn't great because of the social economic class or its educational system. In 1900, just a few years ago now, relatively speaking, the life expectancy of an American was around 50 years. Today, it is more than 75. Advances in medicine and agriculture are the main reasons. This increased lifespan is not merely a material gain. It's also a moral gain because it means a few more years of leisure. And Americans has invented this thing called retirement, where an individual can devote themselves to a good cause and on more than one occasion enjoy their grandchildren. And unlike other countries where old people seem to have nothing to do but just wait and die, in America, old are incredibly vigorous, and people in their 70s still pursue the pleasures of life. But America isn't great because of its senior citizens, because of its medicine or lifestyle. What makes America great? Ultimately, my position is that America is great because of the grace of God. Grace. God's grace. His gift. Unearned, undeserved, and oftentimes unappreciated. We don't deserve God's grace. We don't earn God's grace. It's simply who God is. His grace gives us freedom. It's interesting, as those who are history buffs will note, that in France, at about the same time the American Revolution was going on, that the French people rose up against its government and they fought for equality. And as a result, they got communism and socialism. In America, we fought for freedom and we got democracy. Freedom gave us creativity. It gave us spontaneity. It gave us the ability to think outside of the box. And it is called the Great American Experiment, where people do not have to be ruled, but are free from rulers. And that we, as an experiment, seek to rule ourselves. Freedom gave us peace. It gave us a cure for fear, a positive, optimistic view of the future, a joy of living rather than a fog of pessimism. What makes America great? Number one, and beyond all else, the grace of God. God's grace is truly amazing. Yes, it's a free gift. It's undeserved. It's unconditionally given by God. It stands directly opposed to legalism. It is the Emancipation Proclamation that declares that all men are equal in the sight of God. And it's that grace that guides us into God's presence. Grace gives. It's the oil in relationships. It's the charm and acceptability in humanity. God's grace. I thought if there was another reason why America, its grace, it's also a characteristic of God. One that's unlike any other country that's really ever been or is today. America is great because America is forgiving. I want you to think with me for just a minute. God offered and we accepted. America is the very first country in all of the world that outlawed slavery. As individuals, stated in our Declaration of Independence, are all created by God equal in His sight. The first country to outlaw slavery. As a country, we ask God to forgive us for enslaving those in whom He created. And God forgave. America was the first country not only to be forgiven, but to offer forgiveness. And it was the very first country that offered all of its people a religious freedom, a the ability to worship God in any way that a person sees fit. Not tolerance of religion, but a freedom to worship. Many countries today, people from different faiths and tribes are engaged in some kind of bloody conflict. If you haven't seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, you need to look at it. It's difficult to watch. As a genocide takes place because one group of black people are different than another group of black people, and those of us who are not black can't tell the difference, but they can. And genocide as a result. In many countries today, people from different faiths, different tribes, different religious background, like maybe the Serbs and the Croatians, or the Shiites and the Hindus, or the Hindus and the Muslims, or the Irish Catholics and the Irish Protestants, or the Jews and the Palestinians, or the Hindu or the Tishites. They all have their own little way to see God, and they are totally intolerant of anyone else. In America, we recognize God. We recognize God as the creator. Not just the creator of us, but the creator of everything. And we are his stewards, given the greatest gift, life, to care for and to manage God's creation. America is the first country in the history of mankind to offer forgiveness to its enemies. I want you to think about this for a minute. What other country rallies all of its resources to destroy an idea and another system of government, and then after it's victorious, rebuilds the country that it just destroyed in war? Go through the Bible and look, even as God's people took over others, was told to go in and plunder, take all of the resources and bring it back. Not in America. In America, we go in and we conquer an idea, and then we give the country back. And we offer forgiveness to those in whom we've defeated. I can give example after example of the world wars, how that America rebuilt and retooled Germany. To today, Germany is one of the greatest powers in the entire world. Japan, of all country, would you say, that bombed us and then we conquered them to give them back their country and retool their factories so that they can employ their workers and then sell us what they're producing. And we do it freely, joyfully. After Korea, Vietnam, Kuwait, Afghanistan, Iraq, we rebuild their schools. We repave their roads. We establish electric plants. We place in power those who view freedom as the most important characteristic that a person could have. America's great because they're forgiving. And I was thinking, besides the grace of God, and besides taking on a characteristic like God and being forgiving, America is great because its people have obeyed God. As I go back in history and I look at the founding fathers, you can see their obedience. And some of them were obedient even if they did not believe. Before the Declaration of Independence was signed, it's interesting that Congress declared a national time of fasting and prayer. Those who did not believe God was involved or God was actively involved in his creation still supported a time of fasting and prayer. After the Declaration was signed, it was sent to the people all over New England, printed in newspapers, and was said to be read before congregations. For this document laid the groundwork of our freedom. And it's interesting, in its first two sentences, it referred to God 3 separate times. It said that there was a God, a natural God, and this God was active, involved in our lives. It labeled this God as the Creator. It says that he not only was actively involved in his creation, but that he gave. He physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually put in us the concept that every person had the right to life. Anytime that an individual takes another individual's life, it's a violation of God's principle laid down in the very first sentences of the country's rules. That every person was given liberty or freedom. And that every person, no matter who they were, was given the right to pursue his own personal happiness. That you can have a job, and that you can use the proceeds of your job for whatever you want to use them for after you pay your taxes. This document reveals a firm reliance on God's protection and his divine providence. Two huge, if you've not seen them, you need to go to Washington, D.C. and look at these. Two huge oak doors that enter into the Supreme Court, huge, thick doors, are engraved deep into the wood, the 10 Commandments of God. If you've ever run through Washington, D.C., you can't help but look at the federal buildings and the monuments that are there in Washington, D.C., and most of them have engraved into the stone Bible verses. The Washington Monument on the capstone, on the cornerstone, and also on the capstone, are written in Latin these two words. You know what they are? Praise God. You see, our nation's founders realized that their freedom came from God, not from men. And it was only God who could take away that freedom or ensure that freedom in the future. In God's blessing and his promise to his own people, those who would honor him and bless him, are these words. Joshua, chapter number 1, starting in verse number 6. It reads, "Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them." I want to point out something. God gave the land to Joshua not because of Joshua, but because of Joshua's forefathers and the promise that God gave to them. We experience God's freedom. We experience the blessings of God not because of the works that we have done, but the promise that was given to those who began this country. He says in verse number 7, "Be strong and very courageous. Be careful." Oh, how many thousands and thousands of times I have said this word to my kids. Be careful. Just the other day, when I finished talking to my daughter, I said, be careful. God tells Joshua, be strong. And he tells us today, be strong. Don't go around in fear. Be courageous. But also be careful. What does it mean to be careful? You ever thought about it? As you're climbing a ladder to clean out the gutters and someone says, be careful. What does it mean to be careful? Simply this. Go slow. Don't get in a hurry. Don't make quick decisions. Don't act rash. Go slow. Watch. Pay attention. Observe what you're doing. That's what it means to be careful. In this case, God says, be careful. Go slow. Watch what you're doing. In obeying all of the law that my servant Moses gave to you. Don't turn from it to the right or to the left. In other words, don't get radical Don't get over here on the right side to where you only see things from the viewpoint of those from the right side. Neither go over here to the left side and pay attention to only things that are on the left side. Do you hear what I'm saying? A great balance. It's interesting sometimes that there's a news event that's taking place. And you turn over to a certain channel on your television. I won't tell you which one. And you hear the news report. And then immediately you click over to the alternate position. And if they even have that on, to hear a different point of view. If you are careful, if you are paying attention to what you're doing, if you're not extreme one side or the other, he says, then you will be successful wherever you go. He says, don't let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Keep it on your lips. In order to have it on your lips, he says, meditate on it day and night. And in order to have it on your lips and meditate it, you've got to place it deep into your heart. And then he says that word again. So that you may be careful. Going slow. Paying attention. Not radical. To do everything written in it. And then he says this again. If you do that, you will be prosperous. The only time in all of the Bible there is a promise of materialistic gain is right here. And it has nothing to do with paying your tithe. It has nothing to do with going to church. It has nothing to do with believing in God. It has nothing to do with getting hit on your head or blown on. It has everything to do with obedience. He says, then you will be prosperous. And then you will be successful. And he closes out these words by saying, have I not commanded you? Rhetorical question. Of course he has. Of course God has. So then be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be swayed by those who are filled with terror. Do not be discouraged. Why am I not filled with terror with those who want to terrify me? And how can I be strong and how can I be courageous? Because of these last words. For the Lord, our God, will be with us wherever we go. In God's blessing and his promise to his own people, those who honor and those who bless God will also be honored of God and will be blessed of God. I suppose this principle extends. Genesis reveals that God called Abraham to be his own people. He ordained Abraham to be a mighty and everlasting nation. Even though the descendants of Abraham sinned and turned against God, he never turned away from them. In Genesis chapter 12, there's a promise. It's sort of like the Joshua promise. It's a promise of God to each one of us. He says, I will make Abraham, he's talking to, a great nation. Abraham, I'm going to bless you. And Abraham, I'm going to make your name great. So much so that you are going to be a blessing to others. And then listen to this. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to bless those who bless you. And I'm going to curse those who curse you. To the point that in you, all of the families of the earth are going to be blessed. There's a definition there of greatness. To be great in the sight of God means that you are a blessing to others. And I go back, maybe a little biased, but I think truthful, trying to be objective. There's never been a country on the face of this earth, in all of the histories of all of the nations that have ever been nations in this world, outside of the fact that the Jewish people gave us the Messiah, no country has blessed other countries more than the United States of America. To the point that many of us has criticized the fact that we give so much away. But it's a characteristic of our greatness. The United States of America is responsible for establishing what we call modern day Israel. It was 1948, this country, the United States of America, through the United Nations, supported a homeland in Palestine for God's chosen. And up till recent days, the United States and Israel have been the closest of allies. The Israelis have looked to the U.S. for political inspiration, financial and military assistance, and diplomatic support. America's support for the Jewish people goes back, not to 1948, but really the beginning of the colonies. It's interesting, again, a student of history, to hear John Adams state that he believed in rebuilding Judah as an independent nation. Abraham Lincoln desired for the Jewish people to be liberated from the oppressors and have a home in Palestine. Those that bless Israel are blessed. And that's why America is great today. Not because of something necessarily we've done, but a promise from God. In 1830, a French philosopher, lists his name, toured America. When his tour was completed, they asked him, "What do you think?" And he made this observation: "I've toured America and I've seen the richness of its fields, the wealth of its mines, and every precious mineral known to man is found in America. I've seen its industrial might. I've seen its beautiful rivers and streams and lakes, along with the grandeur of its mountains. I've noticed the abundance in its forest and its climate. Yet in none of these things did I see the cause of America's greatness. It wasn't until I went into the churches and I found the reason for America's greatness. America is great because America is filled with the goodness of God. And as long as America remains with God's goodness, it will be great. And if it ever ceases to be good, it will cease to be great." America is great. America is great in the sight of God, because America once attempted to reflect God. A common moral code once held this country together. But if we no longer stand on the same moral ground, and if we make a conscious decision to be like the rest of the world, rather than to reflect Him, and then reflect other individual humans in their most deprived state, America will cease to be great. America will only be great in His sight when we call upon His grace, when we ask Him to forgive us, and we too, in turn, offer that forgiveness to others, and when we obey His word. My conclusion is that America is the greatest, the freest, and the most decent society in existence. It is an oasis of goodness in a desert of cynicism and barbarianism. This country, once an experiment, unique to all the world, is now the last best hope for the world. And by making sacrifices for America and by our willingness to die for her, we bind ourselves by an individual cord to those great patriots who fought at Yorktown and Gettysburg and Iwo Jima, and we prove ourselves worthy of the blessings of freedom. By defeating the terrorist threat imposed by Islamic terrorism and radicalism, we can protect America's way of life while once again redeeming humanity from this global menace. History will view America as a great gift to the world, a gift that Americans today must persevere and cherish. So whether the political pundit says, "I'm going to make America great again," or whether they say America was never great in the first place, or there's no uniqueness at all with America, I draw this to your attention, that America's great because God made her great. And it will continue to be great as its people turn to Him. Will you pray with me this morning?